Rigan knew about the magic bag and how to get it. Meanwhile, the young adventurers planned to secretly enter the dungeon again, but Sugu forbade it because they had to keep and respect the rules. Rigan told Shiro about the investigation of world-level magic usage, which had many levels, and world-level magic was the highest, capable of changing civilization. In the past, this world was inhabited by various races, but races that were strong in the military were weak in reproduction and eventually conquered by humans. They summoned 6 goddesses of vengeance, and world-level magic was used for the first time. Although the goddesses were quickly defeated by humans, they managed to cause damage by creating goblins and monsters that kept appearing. World-level magic was activated again to summon adventurers to this world more than 200 years ago, and Shiro, who had been known in the game for almost 100 years, realized that time in the game ran 12 times faster than in the real world, so nearly 100 years was equivalent to 8 years since he started playing the game. 20 years ago, Shiro entered this world when the game officially launched. He wanted to investigate further because, according to Rigan, both humans and players here possess an energy called a soul. This soul directly affects the player's memories, so each time they die and are revived, they lose some memories. At that time, the group of children decided to re-enter the dungeon, but suddenly Minori realized something. Toya felt the same. Minori, still scared, slapped her face to boost her courage and stood up. She proposed that they wait until the afternoon before entering again. She reasoned that they could get to know each other better, as despite being together for 3 days, Minori felt she didn't know much about them. Rudy then demonstrated his ability, creating a very powerful magic orb. Toya introduced his enemy provocation skill, though its range was short. He wanted to wait until he could attract many enemies before launching an attack. Isuzu revealed a new ability to reduce damage. That day, they spent time getting to know each other better. The next day, they returned to the dungeon and worked together as planned. Toya led by attracting the enemy's attention, followed by Isuzu and Rudy attacking, while Sira observed from a safe spot for healing and Minori kept watch. They successfully won through good teamwork. Meanwhile, Henry noticed that Shiro seemed tired from continuously working. She wanted Shiro to rest, but Shiro was thinking about the information from Ran about this world and whether they would forget the real world if they died too often here. Suddenly, Minori called, and Shiro realized that the group of children had understood and overcome their issues. Shiro decided to move forward with a feeling of happiness similar to Minori. Isuzu then admitted her feelings towards Rudy, realizing that her attraction was because Rudy reminded her of a small dog, not a romantic interest. The next morning, Sujiro's team rushed to the beach after hearing about a monster attack. Although the monsters were low level, their numbers were vast. Sujiro and his team were surrounded by a swarm of fish, while Sugu couldn't help as he was fighting goblins. Nyan, patrolling in the air, reported that more goblins were coming. In the Ice Palace, Shiro was informed about the thousands of goblins approaching. Meanwhile, Marie and Sugu's groups rejoined. They found out that the goblins were targeting a small town without defensive walls, and it would be destroyed overnight. However, these goblins were just a medium-sized group that split off to loot, so they could still be stopped. Minori wanted to help, even though Isuzu felt they were still weak. Minori proposed a plan to attack the goblins before they reached the town. Sugu agreed with the plan, although Marie was worried. After hearing the plan, Shiro held an emergency meeting with the nobles, but they couldn't reach an agreement yet. The group of children then encountered some goblins and managed to defeat them with good teamwork. Shiro realized that the nobles would ask for their help, but they couldn't assist without a proper plan. An easy way would be to divide some roles for them to act. At that moment, the princess overheard some officials talking about seeking help from the adventurers. However, this would mean they would owe the adventurers and would have to avoid exposing their weaknesses. They also didn't want to reveal that the night forces had disappeared. The princess then went to meet Krusty. She thought he should be sleeping now, but despite being considered lazy, he still had to look after the children who were currently preparing for the next wave. Judy seemed happy with the new gloves they got during their recent trip to the dungeon. It only enhanced the mage's power, so the whole group gave it to Judy. It was the result of the group's collective effort, so Judy appreciated it very much. 3 representatives from the Round Table Council had been invited to meet with the landlords. Shiro knew that the other party was waiting for them to speak first, so Shiro stood up and directly asked where the night forces were currently located. Wanting to hide it, they spoke vaguely and asked the adventurers to solve this problem. A landlord whose territory was being attacked stated that the adventurers' power was given by the gods, so they should be responsible for protecting this continent. Merchant sibling Michai, angry, slammed the table, saying they were not obligated to help this alliance because they were not its members. The other landlords didn't intend to force them to fight but wondered if the adventurers would stand by and do nothing while the continent was in danger. Michai said they were not animals to be commanded by the landlords. They could indeed be immortal, but adventurers also face the risk of losing their memories. Michai's overreaction left Krusty confused about what to do, but the princess entered and asked Krusty for permission to go to their city. She wanted to gather volunteer soldiers, and in return, she would tell them about the disappearance of the night forces. The landlords were angry at her actions, but the king ignored them and asked her to continue. He acknowledged that humans were weak compared to adventurers, but they had no right to use their weakness to force adventurers as tools. He knew that adventurers were free people, so he would ask for help from those willing to assist. The princess then became exhausted, and Krusty caught her. Shiro decided to hand over the command to Krusty. Krusty then took the princess back to the city. Shiro realized that the princess had done something no one else could do, and it seemed that the situation there would change thanks to her, the shy princess. The princess was then fascinated by the bustling place. Krusty had to return to the meeting briefly, so Shiro and Akatsuki would escort her. She didn't know where to start, so Shiro would help her. Michai at the castle seemed desperate, not knowing what to do. She saw Sojo, who had just arrived, surrounded by women, making Sojo's subordinates jealous, but they had to restrain themselves because it was work. Shiro then took the princess around the city and brought her to get a beautiful dress made. The children approached the princess and invited her to eat burgers. Everyone was happy because she looked like a princess from their imagination. Shiro then returned with the dress and asked Akatsuki to help the princess change her clothes. Once done, Shiro brought the princess to meet everyone. Shiro gathered them and announced that the princess's alliance was under attack and they would surely easily overcome the goblins, but the problem was they wouldn't get a reward for this. So if anyone didn't want to participate, they could stay home and ignore the alliance. However, he still wanted the princess to convince them herself. The princess wore the dress and looked stunning. She introduced herself and acknowledged that her country was in danger and the night forces had disappeared. She apologized for their council's intention to force them to fight just because they were immortal. This place was too prosperous, so she didn't know what reward to give. She admitted that she was lazy and shy, nothing more than a vase, but as a princess, she had to take responsibility for protecting her homeland. Everyone felt her sincerity, so they agreed to help her. They were waiting for a big event like this to fill their time, so Krusty decided to be the commander and Shiro the chief of staff. They would prepare in 15 minutes, so get ready. The next morning, Shiro wanted them to quickly defeat the goblins because no one knew where the goblins would attack after destroying the alliance. The steamship being completed by the Merchants Guild must be used soon. Krusty will take people on the ship first, while Shiro will lead people to camp in an area as a reserve force. He reported to Michai to monitor the behavior of the landlords on the other side. Henry came to report that the king wanted to meet Michai. The king first mentioned that the landlords were divided because of the actions of the princess, partly because they thought she was secretly colluding with the adventurers. But now, the most worrying issue is the security of his territory. The king apologized for the rude actions of the landlords and their intention to exploit the adventurers. He now understands that the adventurers have power equal to his alliance, so he wants to make a peace treaty with them. However, Henry and Michai did not want to decide on this and handed it over to Shiro. The princess is currently on the ship, worried about the chaos she created, and embarrassed the king before running away. Krusty knew she wanted to fix things, but even though he knew her actions were shameful, he did not regret it because she had asked for their strength, so he felt responsible for joining the fight. There have been many new things for her since she left the alliance, so she feels like a bird in a cage. She has no political ability or military value, she knows her value is almost nothing, but she still wants to protect the freedom of the adventurers. Krusty was about to say something, but his men called him to get ready, so he promised to meet the princess later. At that moment, Marie's group had joined Sugu's group. They managed to protect the city, and Marie was still surprised that the Earthians were very similar to humans. Shiro was the one who realized and reminded them of this. Krusty then stood up to explain the plan to everyone. His men told the princess that Krusty was one of the 20 best commanders among the adventurers. They will also place people to protect the princess, so please don't do anything foolish. Marie's group is currently discussing the battle Krusty will face with the goblins. Krusty's success or failure will affect the security of this place. Suddenly, Minori approached Sira to ask for help. That night, Krusty began to meet with the large goblin forces. The wizards launched the first attack to reduce their numbers, then Krusty led the troops forward. Each goblin only needed one strike to be finished. Krusty's techniques also managed to defeat a large number of enemies. 2 large monsters with fairly high levels attacked him, but Krusty quickly dodged and countered them with one strike. The princess saw Krusty fighting with Spirit, but he seemed a bit lonely. Shiro's logistics team is currently observing the situation and directing the small teams. This logistics team will help the small teams communicate with each other through telepathic connections, making it easier to fight and understand. The situation was improving, so Shiro wanted to also pay attention to Marie's group because if Krusty's forces drove out the goblins, they would surely spread and attack small villages. They need to gather the goblins into one area. Marie's forces are currently stationed in a city near the coast, so they also need to be wary of sea monsters that might invade and pass through Marie to break the siege they built to stop the goblins. Shiro has not been able to go down to the battlefield because he has not fully mastered the situation. On Marie's side, the twin couple is currently patrolling and finds a big wave coming. Marie's group immediately runs there and finds many monsters following. Marie did not want the children to go down to the battlefield, but everyone asked for permission to fight. Sugo also persuaded Marie to agree. On Marie's side, the news of this had been conveyed to Shiro. The trainers currently cannot go down to the battlefield because they have to wait for full energy recovery. Nyan observed the group of children fighting and saw that all had shown progress. Togia had become stronger, Shiro was no longer hindered by recovery and could summon help to fight. Isuzu and Judy worked together very well to produce attacks that, although using few resources, gave maximum results. Rudy became a moving torch, while Minori observed and strategized for the whole team. It seemed she fought like a second Shiro. Shiro could see the battlefield 30 seconds ahead with only a 1-second error. It seemed Minji was chasing Shiro's shadow, and they wondered how many seconds she could predict. Suddenly, an alarm sounded, announcing that the goblins had returned, so the whole group immediately moved there and let the trainers finish the rest. Sugu knew they were at risk, but Minori asked them to trust this group of children. The group then saw a fairly large number of goblins, but they just needed to gather them together. Judy cast lightning to attract their attention, Isuzu slowed them down, and the group used all the attacks they could. After completing their task, Minori reported that she could predict 5 seconds with a 5-second error. Currently, she could not be like Shiro, but she kept trying. An alarm sounded elsewhere, so the group had to keep moving. Shiro told Marie to hold on for another hour because help was coming. Minori's group was almost out of energy and did not know how much longer they could hold on. Hearing that help was coming, they held on. Suddenly, it rained, and goblins and wolves attacked. The goblins could be faced, but the wolves were faster and more dangerous, so Minori had to use an ultimate attack that needed a day's recovery to protect her sister. 2 wolves and 1 high-level goblin attacked Togia, and they were sure to lose. Minori asked Togia to buy time with the high-level goblin and 1 wolf, while the Rudy pair handled the other. Shiro taught the girl that when facing many difficult enemies, the weak must be killed first to reduce the damage they could cause. But before they could act, Togia was hit. Shiro tried to heal, but it needed 8 more seconds for Minori to recover the shield. However, she knew the shield was not enough to withstand all the damage, so Rai decided to lure the wolves to follow her. After successfully diverting 2 wolves, she bit the wolf and blew up her hand shield. The group then looked for a way to use a revival spell for Judy, but Judy could not wake up. Isuzu revealed that Judy was a great Earthian and she had known since they became friends, promising to keep it a secret. Judy always tried hard and hid this because she wanted to be an adventurer. Sira suddenly got the idea to try a healing spell, and somehow Judy responded, although very weakly. This gave them hope. Minji contacted Shiro to ask for help. Previously, Minji had never directly asked for help, only advice, but now she asked Shiro to save a friend. Shiro called Rasen to lead while he left. Shiro then summoned a bird to fly to Minori's position and check the situation. He asked Minji to report the situation, while Togia watched around for monsters. Sira and Isuzu alternated using revival and healing spells every 2 minutes, according to Shiro's advice, to keep Judy's soul from separating after death. According to Regan, there is a way to save a great Earthian if done immediately after death and the body has not separated. Shiro remembered Regan's world-level spell and asked Akatsuki to take control for a while. The princess was brought to meet Krusty, who was bathing, and she asked about the battlefield. It seemed she had many fans. Someone reported that a new wave of monsters had appeared, so Krusty was interested in fighting again. Shiro had finished his plan and heard the steamship was almost at the shore to support Marie's group. He landed and asked Akatsuki to ride the bird and block the area. Shiro arrived and checked the situation, warning the children not to tell anyone about what he was going to do. If they violated, he would leave them. Shiro then used the spell to absorb energy from the entire group and transfer it to Rai to save 1 person, requiring blood and energy restoration. With the energy already available, only a healing spell was needed, but to connect the energy and blood, Shiro used 1 more item that allowed Judy to live again for 3 minutes. Judy woke up and realized that he had died, asking everyone not to blame themselves because sacrifices in battle are common. However, Shiro argued that giving up too easily made a person unworthy of being called an adventurer, but he had a way to change that. Shiro produced a contract for Judy to become an official adventurer, an agreement for Judy to join the guild and adhere to all its rules and duties. In return, Judy would become a free human. Judy accepted the contract and wanted to sign it, but his hand couldn't, so Isuzu helped him. After the contract was signed, Judy's time ran out and he could be resurrected at the temple because he was now an adventurer. This was magic that changed the world's rules, conceived by Shiro, transforming a great Earthian into an adventurer. Meanwhile, Krusty's group encountered a group of goblins riding wolves, including the Goblin King they had to defeat. Krusty's group killed them one by one, even summoning a phoenix bird to help. Finally, the Goblin King was also defeated by Krusty and the rest was left to Shiro. Marie and Sugu could now rest after the exhausting battle. Both had done a good job, and Shiro now realized that adventurers were not just players like him, but companions who would venture together toward new horizons.